few years ago, I was in Mumbai at a party during the Christmas season at the home of the chairman of the the Reserve Bank of India. And I was talking to him about what we were doing at the Institute of Design and what our new connections were through Jamshid and Sam. And he said, "Oh, Sam Pitroda." He said, "He's the reason we can speak on telephones in India." And Sam is known for many more things than that, but what is remarkable about Sam is he continues to do huge things, set them in motion, and then an unusually large number of them tend to come to fruition. And I have only the most general idea of what Sam is ever going to do or talk about, but it's always fascinating. And but what we're moving into today is we always have, as you know, the repeat visitors know, we always have a part of the conference that is about China or India or Latin America. And as we mentioned early on, there will be a giant shift in the field of design and innovation towards Asia. And the next two presentations will give us a glimpse of what's happening in India. So please welcome my friend Sam Pitroda.
Thanks, Patrick. Thanks, Patrick. It's always good to be here. I'm a student of Illinois Institute of Technology almost 50 years ago. Happy to be back. It's always nice to be at home. This morning, I'd like to give you a little feel for what we are trying to do on innovations in India. I'm sure many of you know, India is a very complex country with 1.2 billion people. In 1760, India was the largest economy in the world. 26% of the global economy was India. Invaders have been coming to India for a long time, for hundreds of years. The British invasion and colonization really changed the destiny of the country. Indian economy went from 27% to 2% in just a short span of 200 years. India had the best of the best universities in the world, Nalanda, Takshashila, 2,700 years ago. When Mughals came and burned the literature at Nalanda, it took 3 full days and nights to burn the library. Everything was completely burned. In 1947, at the time of independence, India had very little in terms of production, management skills, technology, and capital. Founding fathers decided to focus on higher education, science and technology institutions like agricultural research, medical research, CSIR, laboratories, atomic energy, and all of that. 50 years after independence, we are just beginning to see the fruits of some of these seeds that were planted at independence. Today, India is growing at the rate of 8 to 10%, leaving aside a few glitches here and there. And I believe India will continue to grow at that rate for at least next 20 years. I had an opportunity to work in India in early 80s. Just to give you a little bit of my background, I was born and raised in a small little village in Orissa in India, where there was no electricity, no water, no doctor, no pharmacy, no schools, nothing. My mother had 8 kids. All 8 were born at home. All 8 turned out to be mentally healthy, physically healthy. I always say they must have done something right. And I came to US to get a PhD in physics in 1964. Came to IIT, studied electrical engineering, built a business in telecom in early 70s in Chicago, sold it to Rockwell International, and then decided to go to India for a visit and tried to make a phone call from Delhi to Chicago and couldn't make a phone call. Then India had less than 2 million telephones. It used to take 15 years to get a telephone connection. And a little bit of arrogance and lots of ignorance said, I'm going to fix this. I came home and I told my wife, I found something interesting to do for next decade. I said, I'm going to go to India and fix India's telephones. Didn't know anything about anything, was naive, and learned later that ignorance was a great asset. Started commuting, then by accident, through some personal connections, met with the Prime Minister of India, gave her a plan to digitize India's telephone network, focus on access as opposed to telephone density, rural telecom, indigenous development, young Indian talent, and a very low-cost solution. All made sense. Finally decided to move back to India, and that was the early seeds of innovations from my perspective in my activities. So we put together a team of 400 engineers, build local products. The key then was bottom of the pyramid, rural telecom. And to work at the bottom of the pyramid, the focus had to be on affordability, scalability, and sustainability. Today, India has 900 million telephones. India is a nation of connected billion. And the key challenge is to take this revolution further with focus on broadband, internet, and then see how we begin to innovate to change Indian systems in education, health, governance, delivery of public services, commerce, and all of that. Simultaneously, in 1991, economic liberalization started in India, because by then we had enough entrepreneurial asset, and government decided to open up the system. Free market economy, liberalization, privatization, all of that has created large number of entrepreneurs in India. Now we have our own multinationals. India exports $80 billion worth of software every year, year after year, and services related to IT. And now we are fairly strong in pharmaceuticals, auto parts, many other industries. My friend Jamshed Godrej will talk more about what they are doing. And just in a short span of 20 years again, many of our industrialists have become global players with great deal of talent, lots of confidence, global presence, and fairly large pool of talent. In spite of all of these great things going on in India, we still have three very fundamental challenges. One, disparity. There's a great deal of disparity between rich and poor, urban, rural, educated, uneducated. And we all have to focus on really decreasing this disparity. Two, demography. We have 550 million young below age of 25. We need to create 15 million new jobs every year, year after year. We need to focus on their job, their prosperity, their future, their skills as the key driver going forward. Where everywhere else in the world, population is aging and decreasing, in India, population is increasing and young. And as a result, this is the workforce for the world. So when we train people, we need to focus on the fact that this is not just the workforce for India, but it is indeed workforce for the world. Third is growth. I take a lot of medications, so I get dried up a little bit. So I hope you don't mind my using water on and off. Third is really growth. If we don't grow at 10%, we cannot address poverty. Because we do have 300 to 400 million people who are below poverty line. We have 250 million people who are illiterate. It's a huge, huge challenge. So we got to focus on growth and development. We need everywhere expansion, more roads, more schools, more colleges, more doctors, more buildings, more energy. Excellence, we got to improve quality of our education, health services, government services, banking, you name it. And three, equity. We have to make sure that the poorest of the poor indeed can get the best education possible. And I am an example of equity in India. Coming from tribal area, very poor family, to be able to get my master's in physics for less than $100 total for 6 years. That is the story of India and lots of people from India. So when we look at these three challenges, diversity or disparity, demography, and development, we realize that we have to focus on two key things. One, education and skill, and two, innovations. To focus on education and skills, Government of India decided to set up a National Innovation Council, a National Knowledge Commission about 6-7 years ago. And we looked at all aspects of knowledge going forward in the 21st century. We looked at access to knowledge, which include libraries, networks, broadband connectivity, portals, affirmative action programs, reservations, quotas, translations, languages. Then we looked at all of the education concepts, school education, vocational education, higher education, distance learning, open courseware, teachers training. How do we get more of our kids into PhD programs? And all of that. Then we looked at creation of knowledge. Who creates knowledge? How knowledge is created? Patents, copyright, trademark, innovations, entrepreneurship. We also looked at the use of knowledge in agriculture, health, small and medium scale industries, and traditional knowledge. We have huge amount of traditional knowledge. Just to give you an idea, we have 12,000 herbal medicinal plants which grow only in India. No one had ever documented this. A lot of this data remains in the family from generation to generation. And the idea was to really digitize this, computerize it, and make it accessible to large number of people. And there are lots of projects like this. We have just digitized 1 million manuscripts. And we probably have close to 100 million manuscripts from our literature that needs to be documented. This is not counting the 3 days of fire at Nalanda. Then we looked at also the use of knowledge in governance. How do we improve governance by using knowledge effectively in decision making? So for example, computerizing all our courts, digitizing all our government files, and all of that. Having put together a plan on 27 different subjects, 300 different recommendations, Government of India decided to spend $70 billion on improving education in the last 5 years. We have a major program called National Knowledge Network, where we connect 1,500 nodes with 40 gigabit bandwidth optical fiber to connect all our universities, all our colleges, major parts of our libraries and R&D institutions to make sure that we begin to share resources and focus on little more research and innovation. Knowing that all research today requires a great deal of collaboration, happens faster than ever before, and is multidisciplinary. We requested government to spend $3 billion to build this network for public. Network is already built. It's operational today with about 1,100 nodes, and 22,000 colleges are already connected to this optical fiber gigabit network. We still don't know how to use it effectively, but the process has started. So then, beside knowledge, the next big challenge was innovation, topic of the day. So Prime Minister decided to set up a National Innovation Council with about 17 of us. We meet once every couple of months, and then we focus on innovations at national level. So when I talk to my corporate colleagues, I tell them the difference between what you do and what we do is you are trying to build a company with focus on IRR, productivity, efficiency, cost reduction, management, organization, stock market, market caps. We are trying to build a nation in totally different sets of parameters. Building a nation is very different from building a company. So don't judge us based on your yardstick, because it doesn't make sense. So what we are trying to do is really look at innovations at a national level. So I want to share with you some of our thoughts and activities. First, we said, like a National Innovation Council, we should request all of the states, roughly 30 states, to set up state-level councils, because each state is different. They have different core competence. Some have mining industries, some have forests, some have service industries, some are focused more on agriculture. So I wrote a letter to all chief ministers saying, please set up a National Innovation Council, State Innovation Council, and put together a plan for the decade of innovations in your state. Because Government of India has declared 2010, 2020 as the decade of innovation. Because only through innovation we'll be able to create new jobs, be globally competitive, address the challenges related to disparity. Then we decided to set up 100 sectorial innovation councils. One in textile, biotech, nanotech, wireless, semiconductor, pharmaceuticals, you name it. Of these, about 40 are set up. I'm pushing for another 60, but we don't find enough domain experts to come forward and say, I will take on the challenge. Because for every sector, you need 10, 15 nationwide domain experts who could work together. Then we give them a blueprint on how to put together a 10-year plan. Workshops, seminars, get everybody talking and start a conversation on that particular vertical. Then we said we must tell the nation that innovation is a platform. It is not about what happens in your labs or universities. It is all about what happens in social sector, governance, education, health. So we, as cheerleaders at a national level, started talking about innovation as a platform. That everybody must innovate. Think about innovating. It's all about doing things differently. Because a lot of our processes were designed during British Raj 80, 100 years ago. And now we are perfecting those processes by computerizing it, as opposed to paying attention to redesigning processes. So the focus is to redesign processes. How do you get admission in school? How do you get birth certificate? How do you get land record? So one strategy is to look at innovation as a platform at a national level. Second strategy is to only focus on bottom of the pyramid. mainly because many of us firmly believe, and I have said this for the last 20 years, that the best brains in the world are busy solving problems of the rich, who really don't have problems to solve. As a result, problems of the poor don't get the right kind of talent. We have the largest number of poor, and we have a fair amount of young talent. If you have a billion people, you are bound to have 10 million smart ones. There's nothing you can do. So how do we use this talent to solve the problems of the poor? Because we have moral responsibility to solve problems of our own poor and then solve problems of the poor in the world. So we look at bottom of the pyramid not as market, but more as an opportunity to generate higher income for them. Again, focus has to be on affordability, scalability, and sustainability. Our solutions have to be affordable. If they are not affordable, won't scale. If won't scale, it won't sustain. So everything we do must focus on bottom of the pyramid at a national level. That doesn't mean we also don't look at some of the bigger problems. But there are enough rich businessmen like Jamshed Godrej and others who would take care of the bigger, complex corporate kind of R&D activities. Then we said we need to define drivers for innovation. Durability versus disposability is a big driver for us. Don't design disposable products. Design durable products. Then we said we need to focus on ecosystem, venture capital, private equity, patent protection, intellectual property, all of those standard issues that we talk about in Silicon Valley, but from a different perspective. To do a lot of these things, we said we needed a very large fund, $1 billion fund. So we have set up $1 billion fund, which will be launched in July, where government puts in close to $100 million ultimately. There's already made a commitment for initial seed capital. Then we get money from other institutions, including foreign investors, but fairly large institutional investors. And this fund will fund ideas and innovations for the bottom of the pyramid. $1 billion fund would be a good start. Already set up, will be launched. We have spent about a year structuring and talking to everybody on it. Then we are working on clusters. We have roughly 150 major industrial clusters: pharmaceutical, bamboo, brassware, diamond, textile, leather. We go into these clusters and we begin to seed innovations by setting up a toolkit, incubator, training, linkages with R&D labs, universities, and we begin to talk about innovations. Give you two simple examples. We have a bamboo cluster in a place called Agartala, which is eastern part of India, where 400,000 people work on bamboo. And these jobs are being threatened with Chinese products coming into the country. And when we analyze it, we realize that our bamboo is not straight enough. So you get 40% wastage. So I called CSIR lab, get some tissue culture experts, and they said, we know how to do this, but nobody asked us to do it. So we sent a group of tissue culture experts and said, straighten this bamboo out. Then we get into brassware cluster. 500,000 people work in brassware cluster in Moradabad areas. And they have problem with the metal, problem with cleaning the metal. Again, send some scientists saying, look at these problems. Scientists know what to do. Nobody has asked them to look at these kinds of things because it's not very sexy. Everybody is working on satellite, iPhone, everybody is looking at all these gadgets. So the overall culture is gadget oriented and not oriented toward problem solving because it's not sexy. So our job is to really link this up. Then similarly, we are creating innovation centers at universities. All of these things hopefully will create culture to think differently and innovate going forward. We know telecom took 20 years. Innovation will take probably another 20. It's not going to happen overnight because it's a very complex, rigid, hierarchical, feudal society. To shake that system takes a lot of time. The journey has started. Then we realized that the next big thing also has to be focus on internet, social networks, broadband, all of the things that will act more as a catalyst. So we decided to go to government and ask for almost $10 billion to build broadband network in the country. 250,000 local governments are now being connected to optical fiber, again with tens of gigabit bandwidth. Project is approved, funded, it's already launched, it will happen in 2 years. If I say 2, maybe in 2.5, but it will definitely happen. Along with this, we are building platforms for ID, national GIS, cybersecurity, applications like driver's license, food distribution, employment guarantee scheme programs, and all of that. Passport, income tax. Sum total today, we have 10,000 software people working on these things in the government because we got to build all these platforms. When Obama came there, he and I spent about half an hour and I explained to him what we are trying to do. And as a result of that, we launched a joint program between US and India on open government platform. So we took 10, 15 of our software guys, 10, 15 from White House, technology group. They worked together for 8, 9 months. We launched last month open government platform by US and India. And our goal is to offer this platform to all the countries in Africa and Latin America at no cost. So they can begin to take their government data, government documents, and put it on open platform. This is part of the right to information that we have launched in India to really create openness, access, and all of that. These things, again, take time. So we have broadband connectivity, platforms. Like I said, we have 32 million court cases pending. It takes 15 years to get justice. Now we are computerizing all of the 32 million court cases, hoping that we will be able to reduce time to justice to 3 years. But these things require political will, don't happen overnight. But I must say that there are lots of interesting, exciting people who are joining this movement. We have a honeybee network where we have 110,000 projects listed, where people of villages and all kinds of come up with solutions. We call some of it as jugaad, jerry-rigging a solution. We have hospitals that give you quadruple bypass for $2,000 as opposed to $70,000 in US. Huge difference. Eye surgeries for $2, $3. Key is basically bottom of the pyramid affordability. All our work is geared towards that, and this will help not only India, but rest of the world. Where else you can go get a quadruple bypass for $2,000? You can do it in India today. And that's a huge industry. In Bangalore, they are building a hospital of 1,200 beds just for this. Same group is planning to build a similar hospital in Caribbean for the US market. So these people are already thinking of going out. We are looking at education in a new light because we realize that learning models have changed. We don't need teacher to deliver content, create content. Great deal of content is already available on open source. So how do we use this to change the model of education? So we are launching a university called Meta University. I go there end of the month, and we'll probably have a press conference. We'll launch university where you can take courses from 30 universities online and use one of the universities as your physical space, but may not have to register there. Idea is to use the knowledge network that we have built to use scarce resources from our professors and teachers. So we want to look at new models of education, where teacher is more of a mentor. We are creating a new health model with low-cost diagnostics equipment, mobile phone for health data, and the list goes on and on. I recently chaired a committee on railway modernization, where we are planning to spend $200 billion to modernize railways. Got into political debate, put on the back burner. I'm sure it'll come back again at right time. We are looking at smart grid, setting up our own foundry. In the next 5 years, in the next plan, we propose to spend $1 trillion on improving infrastructure. 1 trillion. 500 billion of that will come from private sector. 500 billion will come from government. And this will be of great help in building better infrastructure that we need for power, roads, education, health, and all of that. So the journey goes on. Challenges are massive, very complex. It requires a great deal of political will, collaboration. In a democracy, it's not very easy to do these kinds of things because you got to keep everybody happy, and you can't keep everybody happy. I always give this example. I went to Shanghai in 1980. It was more like Mumbai. Then I went again to Shanghai recently. There's a big road between airport to Shanghai downtown, one straight line. And I said, somebody in China must have drawn a line saying that's the road. Bulldoze everybody. In India, can't do that. Land acquisition will take you 20 years. But those are the beauties of living in a democracy. And those are also the challenges. We do have thriving democracy, at times confusing. It looks to outsider as if everything is chaotic, but underneath it's pretty calm, I must assure you. But we have a long way to go. We know that the journey has just begun to modernize a nation. It is not easy. It requires a lot of talent, a lot of support from a variety of people. Ups and downs. Is more of a roller coaster. But it goes on. It is not for faint-hearted people. It's very complex. The demand on your time is absolutely unreal. I commute. I live in Chicago. I work in India. I'm one of those rare, senior government officers who says, look, I just live somewhere else. Yeah. Everyone has been very nice to me, so I can get away with it. And it gives me ability to look at two different sides of the world. And that has been a great value. Chicago has been a great city for me. It has added a huge amount of value to me and my family and my life. And I enjoy being in Chicago, at IIT, at ID. Patrick, thanks for giving me this opportunity. I see this clock says 2.5 minutes left. Maybe we can have a couple of questions. Thank you, everybody.
So we do have time for questions. I have one.
Yes, sir.
So you get an opportunity, an amazing opportunity, to look at business in the States. You've built at least 2 very successful businesses here. And you get to look at the relationship between government and business here and the relationship between government and business in India. Are they similar? Are they different?
India is at a different stage of development. We are at a different stage of democracy. We are at a different stage of economic development. So it's not a fair comparison. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So many of my American friends would say, how come you don't have this in India, you don't have that in India? Because we are not there. The day we will have all of that, you will cease to be a developing society. You are still emerging market. So you have to accept that as way of life. It's the journey that you got to just move on. Technology helps in expediting that journey. Tools are interesting today than 20 years ago. Internet is a great example. Tools even in health, biotech, nanotech, materials. I mean, my God, technology today offers so many interesting ways of solving problems. Okay. Government, business, is one piece of the puzzle. Government is trying to sort of, liberalize as much as it can, but then there is bureaucracy who wants to control everything. They don't want to let it go because that's power. That's the way life is. So you do whatever you can under the circumstances. You can't wait for all of this thing to be sorted out and then say, then I'll go and change the world. Okay, it just doesn't happen. You got to take the mess as it is, as part of the ecosystem you have to work with.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Oh, sorry.
What funds the government and the progress in India? Is it taxes, or is it exports, or what? What's happening?
Both. Like you have here. There is tax. I got to pay. I don't earn income in India. I don't take salary or anything, so I don't have to pay tax. Because I have no bank account. I have nothing. I don't own anything.
Well,
Nothing.
I know, but
So I'm just saying, but you got to pay tax if you own.
you have
like
to pay
here.
taxes.
Of course you have to. You're running a nation. How could you run a nation without not paying taxes?
Well, that's what I'm asking.
I hope there is a better way to do it.
Okay.
Yes, you pay taxes and you export a lot. I think Indian export, correct me if you're wrong, maybe Jamshed can, is about 200 billion a year or something. It's about 200 billion a year export.
I see.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Income tax is one piece of the income. Jamshed is adding to the fact that other piece of the major piece of the income is excise duty, import duty, and all of that. If I took a Mercedes or a Rolls Royce from here, let's say Mercedes cost me 100,000, in India it will be 250,000. 150,000 you got to pay to the government. If you use Mercedes, might as well pay tax.
That's what I wanted. Thank you.
In corporate America, you talk to executives, there's no common understanding of the word innovation. So how do you explain to business leaders or leaders in India what innovation is? It's a hard concept to
You'll be
grasp, I guess.
surprised at the sort of level of understanding on innovations in India. Yeah. Diversity is a great driver for innovation, according to me. And Indian diversity forces you to innovate. Everything is sort of so very different. Different sound, smell, color, traffic chaos, everything is chaotic. You just go out on the street and you say, my God, there is so much that needs to be fixed. And that forces you to think differently. I think Indian businesses are very innovative in their own way, otherwise they won't survive. And they are thriving now. So some are not, but most of those are very innovative. And Jamshed will talk about what they are doing. A great example of innovations is Godrej. And you'll hear him shortly.
Hi. Concept of bottom of the pyramid is an amazing innovation and one not well embraced in the U.S. What would you say the U.S. or other developed democracies could learn about innovation from India?
I think the main lesson that we have learned is that if you don't focus on affordability, it won't scale. Plus, I find, this is a whole different debate. It may take another half an hour, is that the whole model that we have in US, which world copies based on consumption, is not scalable, workable, desirable, scalable. You can't have a model that US has saying, during Christmas and Thanksgiving, go buy lots of stuff. So everybody would be happy. If we buy a lot of stuff in US, guy in China, India, Korea, Taiwan, Honduras, wherever, everybody's happy. It just doesn't make sense anymore. It was okay when 300 million, 250 million hogged all of the 50% of the world resources. Now there are 3 billion more who also want same kind of lifestyle. 1 billion from India, 1 billion from China, 1 billion from probably former Soviet Union. You cannot have this lifestyle for everybody. Just not possible. So don't use that model. Unfortunately, the whole world is completely fixed on US-based developmental model which only thrives on consumption. We got to create new model. We don't know what that is. So the whole idea of GDP, GNP, per capita income, balance of payment, I think it's all gone. We need new economics. Okay? I very firmly believe, and we are talking about this at length. It may take decades before we get handle on it. You must remember, after World War II, US created this model. World Bank, IMF, NATO, UN, WIPO, you name it, all institutions were set up by US. None of these things make sense anymore in the form they are. So we got to rethink through a lot of this. We are not creating new institutions for the 21st century. All of our institutions were created 70 years ago. That's where innovation is required. Is GDP the right measure? I mean, I remember people used to say in 90s, oh, India is very poor because your balance of payment is 1 billion. Where do I put Taj Mahal on it? On the balance sheet. We had one temple recently, correct me if I'm wrong, where we found $20 billion worth of gold hidden in one temple. They just found it a few months ago. $20 billion worth of gold just sitting there. It was not on any balance sheet. Anyway. Thank you, Sam. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.